Hi, this is Michelle, and you are listening to The Pricing on the Cake.
Welcome to episode 7 of The Pricing on the Cake, the podcast that's all about growing a profitable business confidently. If you're a female entrepreneur who's newer in business, then this is the show for you. Today, I'm joined by the wonderful Michelle Marks. Michelle, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, Courtney, thank you so much. I feel so lucky to be on your podcast.
Oh, that's really sweet. Michelle, please introduce yourselves to us and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. Well, my name's Michelle, and I'm the founder of Laptops and Lattes, and that's a community for women who run service-based business in Australia. And I'm a business strategist and a mentor for those women. And what I specialise in is helping people to gather all of their ideas and make sense of it so that they can move forward and grow their business.
I can imagine that's I don't imagine, I know that that's a really valuable resource for entrepreneurs, because I know that especially in the early days, you've got so many ideas, so many things that you want to do, and being able to crack into that and decide, what you're going to prioritize and what you're going to spend time on can be really, really challenging for people. Is that what you find?
Yeah, absolutely. Just your brain is just going at 1,000,000 miles an hour with all these things. I mean, it's a combination of things that you learn, things that you have to do, things that you want to do, things that you should have been doing yesterday, but all these things on top of, the little things you have to do for running your business. So yeah, your mind is just so full of all these ideas that you have, and it's kind of difficult for people to know where to start, how to start, what they should prioritize, what they should and shouldn't be doing, so
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay, well, let's chat about that for a little bit in terms of what do you find, or can you share with us like 1 or 2 practical tips of how someone can know where to start, or what is the first thing they should do if you're starting a business and it feels like you've got an endless list of things that you have to set up and do. And I remember, and as I'm sure you remember, being back at the very, very beginning of setting up a business, and it just seems like the list of things that you have to have or buy or invest in is endless, and it can be really confronting. What do you generally recommend to people?
Yeah, it can be really, really daunting, and you sometimes question yourself whether you should, you've made the right decision sometimes.
Yeah.
But there are so many tools and techniques that you can use to prioritize what you should and shouldn't be doing. But the first thing that I always like to recommend is to just stop and just think about where it is you want to be. Think about your bigger picture and where it is that you're going. And the reason I say that is because if you want to go on a holiday, how can you plan for that holiday if you don't know where you're going? So you know where you're going, you know what to pack, you know what kind of clothes to wear, you know what sort of things you can do when you get there, and you can accurately plan your journey of how you're going to travel there, all that sort of stuff, if you know where you're going. And it's the same in your business as well. So if you are if there's somewhere that you want to head in your business, you can then think back to all of your ideas and think, okay, well, which one is going to help me get there? Which one is going to help me get there faster? Which one's going to help me enjoy the journey more? And so going back to your bigger picture is always a good way to just realign yourself with, what's important. Because the thing is, especially if we're on social media, we're exposed to so much.
Yeah.
Especially if we're in the business world, we'll come across, specialists in different areas that are telling us we should be doing this, we should be doing that, all these things, and you're like, oh my God, I can't keep up. We kind of have to at some point block some of that out and think, is this going to help me with my bigger picture, not someone else's bigger picture, not someone else's version of success or happiness or whatever. It's got to be what you want. So if you can just take a minute and think, okay, this is what I've got to do. Is it really aligned with where I want to be? That's the first step.
Yeah. It's a big first step, but it's such an important one. And I think you've really hit the nail on the head there, Michelle, in terms of really getting to know your bigger picture and where you want to end up long term. And it can be, this is something that I don't know if you find this as well, but I have a little bit of resistance from people sometimes, especially if they're very, very new, and they'll say, well, I don't really know where I'm going to end up. I kind of have some ideas of what I'd like. And I'm like, that's fine. I would at least start with those, because you just don't know what you need to prepare for. Your business could grow in any number of directions, right? And no, you may not be able to anticipate it, and that's okay. That's what being, flexible and being able to adapt is all about. And that's part of the fun of it, as well as all the unexpected twists and turns, and being able to learn and grow from those things as well. So I'd love to ask you a little bit about pricing now. I know that you and I have had a lot of conversations around pricing over the last, I don't know how long we've known each other, maybe like the past year or so. But I'd love to hear, what were your thoughts and attitudes like in terms of pricing at the very, very beginning, when you were first setting up either this business or your last business, which I know you had, and feel free to mention that as well. Tell me a little bit about what your early day mindset around pricing was like.
Okay, so we're going to have to go way back, because I started my first business when I was 18, and I'm now a little bit older than that.
Just a little bit, only a little bit.
And I have to say that pricing and understanding my value has always been one of the biggest challenges in my business life. I've had many, many businesses that some have succeeded and some have failed miserably. And we all learn from those.
Yeah.
But a big factor in those is pricing. And that's why I love what you do, because it can, poor pricing can make or break a business, can't it?
Yeah. Did you find that it was, for the businesses that didn't work out, did you find that pricing was a major or a part in that?
It played a part in it, and mainly for sustainability. And it doesn't matter how well I did something. I could be highly skilled, and any business owner can be highly skilled in what they do, but if they're not pricing effectively, you can't pay your expenses, you can't pay yourself a wage, you can't pay your tax, you can't pay you can't outsource to anyone, you can't pay employees. So it becomes a labor of love that's essentially just a hobby that you're not getting paid to do. So, which is all well and good, but when we're trying to build a business that, can support our family, can support ourselves, it's not going to work. So essentially, yes, my businesses that didn't work out, whether it was for enjoyment factor or because, other things came along, my businesses would close for various reasons, but I could see that they weren't, a factor in them not working was because my pricing wasn't sustainable. I wasn't charging anywhere near enough to build and grow my business to where I would want it to be.
Yeah. It is such a big thing. And especially when you look back and you see, the reasons why a business didn't work out, and you look at all of the things that you did and tried and things like that. And often it's not until afterwards that we can look back and see what it was. Because sometimes when you're in the middle of it, you kind of busy just managing everything and sorting everything out. And it's not always easy to do that. So yeah. And what about the rest of your journey from this current business now? How is your mindset changing around it?
So I think over time, and it's a combination of experience and seeing how things change when you make changes. And particularly, I remember my first consult with you around pricing was that, I think that would be around a year ago now.
Yeah, I think it was now.
It changed a lot for me. And I think the combination of being given education from you and the confidence or the courage to make those changes, then seeing those changes working, and now being in the position where I am drawing a wage. I do have a successful business, and I can see its success and sustainability well into the future. A combination of those things is now basically teaching me that lesson that I wished I had learned a long time ago. So in starting a business, not understanding my value and not pricing effectively could have been the downfall of my business, or it could have meant that I was working my butt off all hours of the night on the weekends, just trying to get a little bit of money in, and that kind of takes away the enjoyment.
Yeah, and it's not sustainable.
No, and it takes away a lot of the reason we're in business. I mean, there are so many of my clients, at least that I work with, women who they want something for themselves. They want flexibility around family. They, you know, and if you're working all week long, you have no time for your family. You have no time for your kids or hubby, and the follow-on effects of simply not pricing effectively is huge. I could see that had I not got your help and not had the follow-on effects of pricing effectively, I would not be as happy as I am today.
Oh gosh. Oh, that's really, really awesome to hear. Let's dive into some of those the things that you learned you know, from the consult, and you know, the things that you've learned and seen over time, and the things that you implemented and took action on. Because even though, yes, it's, you know, it almost seems self-serving to have you here like saying those things about my consult, but the other side of it is you actually need to take the action. Like those things, those results that you're seeing only happen because you took on what I said, and then you actually made the action, you did the work. And that's the thing with pricing, is that it's not a quick fix. You need to be willing to work hard at it and actually make the effort to make it work. And that's something that you did, and I can't take ownership of that. So it's definitely a team thing here. But yeah, I'd love to hear, you know, what sort of insights and things you learned, or things that changed for you in terms of, what you learned around pricing through that consult, and what you've implemented practically and how you did that.
Okay, so there's a few things that really, really stick out that I've learned from you specifically, and they are around value-based pricing rather than hourly rate, but also seeing the value. And I think you normally present this in a value cake.
Yep.
It's all about the cake, isn't it?
It's all about cake.
And it's basically around the fact that it's not just time that we're factoring in here, that you need to look beyond the time that you give to see the true value of what you're providing to your clients, and incorporating that into how you price it, because it's not just your time. There's so much more that goes into it and comes out of it. Those are probably two of the biggest things that I've learned from you, that I have held on to in moving forward with my pricing. So we can talk about those.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'll just quickly mention too, for the people listening, that the value cake is basically a 3-part framework that I often teach clients in terms of knowing the value that you provide. And so if you can imagine, there's like a pie, or a cake rather, and there's 3 parts in it. So it's cut into 3s, and the cake itself represents your whole value. And then you've got one part that is your inputs, one part is outputs, and one part is outcomes. Your inputs are everything that you use or consume to actually create your product or service. So like Michelle said, it's your time, your energy, your electricity, your skills, your experience, etc. Your outputs are the actual thing that you sell. So it's your service or your product. And then your outcomes are the natural consequences of your outputs. So for example, if you create websites for people, the website itself is the output, and then the outcome might be more traffic or more sales, or a higher conversion rate or something like that. So that's what Michelle was referring to there. But yeah, Michelle, tell me a little bit more about your transition from hourly rates to value-based pricing, because I know that, as someone who is a VA and works with VAs, and I work with quite a few VAs myself, this is a really, really common question and challenge that pops up. I have a lot of people who will say to me, I really want to move away from hourly rates to value-based pricing, but I'm not sure how. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey for you, and what that transition has been like, maybe what your challenges were and how you overcame them too?
Sure. So my previous business was design and virtual assistant. So that just sort of puts a bit of context to it. So I found with virtual assistant services, when it was mixed services, a bit of admin, it was a little bit more difficult, I found, to switch from hourly rates. But I found design to be quite a lot easier. But what I found was that it was very difficult for me to establish, especially when I had clients who wanted a quote in advance, and I'd be sitting there thinking, okay, well, it will take me this number of hours and at this hourly rate. Oh my God, this is too hard. You know, it was so hard to estimate. And let me give you an example of designing a logo or a branding project for a business. Now, when you're dealing with the creative process as well, you can't rush the creative process.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at a branding project where you've got to design a logo, work with the client, establish their mission, vision, values, preferences, who their client is, ideal client, target audience, all that sort of stuff that goes into it, that you can estimate in terms of time. So that's fine. But when you have a logo, you may absolutely nail it on the first design, or you could have 20 designs that went into the rubbish bin. So in looking at that as at an hourly rate, from a client's perspective, one client gets a logo absolutely nailed to the brief within 2 hours of designing. And then another client who's had 20 designs going in the garbage bin after 10 hours of design work and still hasn't got the product.
Yeah.
How can you justify that in terms of, you spend 2 hours, you bill a client for 2 hours for something, and then 10 hours for a client who still doesn't have anything? I mean, it's not sort of fair from that perspective on either side.
Exactly. Because both of them have the same expectation as well. Both of them are just, only expecting a logo, because on their end, they're not aware of the creative process. They're not aware of the time it takes, the skill it takes, all of those things. And so to them, their perception is that they're getting the same thing. And so there could even be a perception of pricing unfairness there if one person is being charged more just because it took longer to get the same result as someone else.
Yeah, and sometimes you don't even quite get there. After 10 hours, and you just the designer's pulling their hair out because they haven't quite got it. I mean, they'll have to go back and communicate with the client. The basis is the value at the end of it is the same. So why should the cost be sort of different? And in some respects, it's punishing the client if it takes longer. It's punishing the designer if it doesn't, because if you're charging an hourly rate and you get less. But at the end of that, removing the time factor was huge for me, because I feel that takes away resentment as well.
Okay.
And that was a big factor for me, is I don't want my client to resent me, and I don't want to resent my client. If I have charged them on an hourly rate but have exceeded those hours, I don't want to resent them for that. If I have nailed the brief, or if I'm taking much longer than I should, I don't want the client to resent me for that. So in switching from an hourly rate to value-based pricing, or to a package, removes that resentment and that time being a factor. And from a creative perspective, if you're on a deadline, sometimes being on a deadline helps, but other times if you feel like you're being rushed or limited, it can stifle the creative process.
Sure.
So just from that perspective alone, it was nice to just remove that factor. But also knowing that I could, if I didn't nail the brief, I could keep working to get the result I wanted for the client. And also, if I nailed it straight away, it didn't make a difference, because time wasn't the issue.
Yep, exactly.
So that was a huge thing for me. I didn't want to be limited to time. I didn't want to be constantly recording my time. I didn't want any resentment on either side. So, removing time as the issue was, removed that for me.
Yeah.
And that was huge for me in terms of packages. But secondly, I could also increase how much I charged, so that I could focus more time on getting it right for my client, without having to rush through heaps of work just to make my budget.
Yeah. And when you rush through, you're often not your best when you're rushing. And so you're not giving the most value to your client as well at the same time. And so I'm really, really glad you mentioned the time thing, because often when I'm working with, especially a service-based business owner, one of the first things I'll often encourage her to do is stop tracking her time. And it's often met with this look of panic of I can't do that. I can't not track my time. How will I know how long I'm spending on things? I'm a huge fan of managing your time, making sure that you're organizing your time and managing it really well. You know, I certainly have deadlines that I have to manage, and so I have to organize my time in that. But you know, when people ask me, you know, how many hours a day do you work? The answer is as many as I need to, honestly. And you know, people have asked me before, you know, how do you know if you're being underpaid? You know, how do you, you know, do you track your time? Da da da. And I'm like, I don't track my time at all. I set a price, and the price that I give them is the price that they pay every time, because you know, that reduces the risk for them, because that's another thing with hourly, is that it's not a price, it's a rate, right? And a customer still doesn't know what they're going to pay, so there's no certainty there, and so that presents some risk level for them. I give them a price, and that's what they're going to pay. And if I have to spend more time than I anticipated, that's on me. That's my responsibility as a professional. That's something that I see as an incentive to get better and to do a really good job, and to make sure that I give them the most value that I can, and everything that I promised, and a little more, because I like to, you know, under promise and over deliver, as a lot of people do. I just think that's the best way to go about it. And the other thing too is that what you focus on is usually what you tend to improve. So if you're focused on tracking your time constantly, then that's the thing that you're going to be, you know, looking at all the time. You're going to be focused on, well, how many hours did I spend here? How many, you know, hours did I spend on that for that client? And that's what you're going to be focused on, rather than on things like asking your customer really good questions, making sure that you're finding out what they really value, you know, how you can give them more value and capture your fair share of that through good pricing. So no, I'm really glad that you mentioned the time thing there, because that's a big one that comes up all the time.
Yeah, it is huge. And even with my own clients as well, I can see it happening, because I have so many VAs as clients. There's being so focused on the time rather than the value. That is precisely the reason why it sticks in my memory so much, you know, from what you've taught me. So
Yeah.
yeah, I know it's hard. And I think, going back to the perspective of a VA, where it's not repeated every time, I know that's a difficult step to overcome.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, I don't sort of see it now as the best way to tackle things, but you know, if that's all it is just the safety net that hardly ever gets used, then you know, so be it.
Yeah, and this time next year you'll be like, nope, I've completely eliminated it from my business. Yeah. we'll have you on in another year's time, and you'll have completely gotten rid of it. You'll be like, I don't need that anymore. Oh, awesome.
Your work is not complete with me yet.
Yeah. No, you're doing awesome things, you know, on your own, Michelle. It's been awesome to see like your journey, and now with Laptops and Lattes as well. We're almost out of time, but I wanted to ask you, you know, what the biggest thing is that you've learned about pricing and or value, you know, over the last, you know, year or so, as you've built Laptops and Lattes, that you would share with other female entrepreneurs out there.
Confidence is a really big one. And I can't believe we haven't even talked about it yet.
Mm-hmm.
Because I see, you know, confidence in your own value, understanding your own value and being able to communicate that is a huge thing to overcome. And my answer to that, I don't know if your answer is different, but my answer to having the confidence is just not chasing confidence. It's just chasing the courage to just try. If you think that you want to move to value-based pricing, or you want to have a price rise, or if there's something else that you want to achieve, just work out how it is you can go about that. Does it mean you need to book a session with Courtney to you know, to help you create a plan or gain, you know, some knowledge around that? You know, just having just that enough courage to just take the first step towards, you know, improving your pricing. And then once you see the result from that, then you can take another step. And then eventually you get to a place where you feel really, really happy and fulfilled with your pricing strategy.
Like you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh no, I love that answer. Not because you mentioned me, but just because you mentioned courage. I think that's the really big thing. I think a lot of people can have those issues with confidence, like self-doubt and imposter syndrome, and they lack courage, and that is such a hard one to tackle. And so the keeping up persistence there to gain that courage and just keep showing up and keep providing value is just the most important thing. Michelle, thank you so much for being here today. If people want to contact you, how can they do that?
So I'm always hanging out, probably more than I should, on Instagram. So I'm always on Instagram, and my handle is laptops_and_lattes. Otherwise, I'm also in my Facebook group, which is the Laptops and Lattes community, which is full of beautiful, beautiful women who are also in service-based business as well. So if you want to find people like you, Courtney's there.
I am there. It's a fabulous, fabulous group. We're going to have links to your Instagram and to the Facebook page as well. For those of you listening, definitely check out Michelle's group, Laptops and Lattes, on Facebook. It is an invaluable resource. The community there is absolutely beautiful. Everyone, engages, posts questions, helps each other out. It's also a great place to, ask market research questions. If you're newer in your business and, you've still got some questions around the product that you're making or the service that you're providing, it is a great place, to have those sorts of conversations with other female entrepreneurs as well. As always, whether you're listening or watching this on YouTube or on your podcast host, please give us a like, subscribe, and a 5-star review. And don't forget, you can also catch some more resources on the Pricing on the Cake Facebook group. And I will see you on the next one. Bye-bye.